19. Organisms and their environment. Water balance. If any part of the water cycle is altered even slightly, it can have a marked effect on the water balance. Energy flow. The sun is the principal source of energy input to biological systems. Energy from the sun flows through living organisms. First, light energy is converted into chemical energy in photosynthetic organisms. Then they are eaten by herbivores. Carnivores then eat herbivores, and they are eaten by the omnivores. As organisms die, the energy is transferred to the environment. Food chains and food webs. A food chain shows the transfer of energy from one organism to the next, beginning with a producer. A food web is a network of interconnected food chains. Producers are organisms that make their own organic nutrients, usually using energy from sunlight, through photosynthesis. Consumers are organisms that get their energy from feeding on other organisms. A herbivore is an animal that gets its energy by eating plants. A carnivore is an animal that gets its energy by eating other animals. A decomposer is an organism that gets its energy from dead or waste organic material. A trophic level is the position of an organism in a food chain, food web, or ecological pyramid. Plants are the producers in a food chain or web. Animals may be primary, secondary, or tertiary consumers. Overharvesting unbalances food chains and webs, as does the introduction of foreign species to a habitat. A pyramid of biomass is more useful than a pyramid of numbers in representing a food chain. Energy is transferred between trophic levels through feeding. Only about 1% of the sun's energy that reaches the Earth's surface is trapped by plants during photosynthesis. At each step in a food chain, only a small proportion of the food is used for growth. The rest is used for energy to keep the organism alive. Pyramids of energy have advantages over pyramids of number or biomass to represent a food chain. The transfer of energy from one trophic level to another is inefficient. Food chains usually have fewer than 5 trophic levels. Shorter the food chain, larger the amount of energy, and vice versa. Feeding crop plants to animals uses up a lot of energy and makes the process inefficient. There is an increased efficiency in supplying green plants as human food. Nutrient cycles. The materials that make up living organisms are constantly recycled. Plants take up carbon dioxide during photosynthesis. All living organisms give out carbon dioxide during respiration. The burning of carbon-containing fuel produces carbon dioxide. The uptake of carbon dioxide by plants balances the production of carbon dioxide from respiration and combustion. IGCSE and O-Level Smart Biology M. Rashid Chatter 030046100457. The combustion of fossil fuels and the cutting down of forests increases the carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere. Soil nitrates are derived naturally from the excretory products of animals and the dead remains of living organisms. Nitrifying bacteria turn these products into nitrates, which are taken up by plants. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria can make nitrogenous compounds from gaseous nitrogen. Plants make amino acids and proteins. Animals eat the proteins. Proteins are broken down to remove the nitrogen by the process of deamination. Microorganisms play an important part in the nitrogen cycle. They are involved in decomposition, nitrification, nitrogen fixation, and denitrification. An ecosystem is a community of living organisms and their physical environment. The main source of energy for ecosystems is sunlight. A food chain is a diagram showing the feeding relationships between producers and primary, secondary and tertiary consumers. A food web illustrates how different food chains are interlinked in one ecosystem. Decomposers are important in the process of decay, which releases nutrients from dead organisms. A pyramid of numbers shows the relative numbers of organisms at each trophic level. A pyramid of biomass shows the relative total mass of organisms at each trophic level. Energy is lost at each trophic level in a food chain, due to respiration, excretion, and digestion. Energy losses explain why there are no very long food chains. In ecosystems, energy flow is linear, while matter is recycled. Carbon is cycled through ecosystems as a result of photosynthesis, feeding and digestion, respiration, death and decay, fossilization, and combustion. Combustion of fossil fuels adds to the level of carbon dioxide in the air. Nitrogen is cycled through ecosystems as a result of assimilation with products of photosynthesis, feeding and digestion, death and decay, excretion, and the action of nitrifying. Bacteria and nitrogen-fixing bacteria. The roots of legume plants contain mutualistic nitrogen-fixing bacteria, which fix nitrogen gas to ammonium ions. The ammonium ions are used by the legume to make protein. Mosquitoes are vector for many diseases, including malaria. The malaria parasite is a protozoan that is transmitted to humans by blood-sucking mosquitoes. There are several ways that malaria is controlled. These methods rely upon an understanding of the life cycle of the malaria mosquito. Spraying insecticides, using mosquito nets and drainage of the stagnant waters. Due to massive population growth, industrialization, and agriculture, humans have had many harmful effects on ecosystems. Deforestation has harmed biodiversity, caused soil erosion, affected climate, and contributed to global warming. Carbon dioxide, methane, and certain other gases contribute to the greenhouse effect, which maintains the Earth's surface temperature at a level suitable for life to exist. Human activities contribute to greenhouse gases, e.g. combustion of fossil fuels produces extra carbon dioxide. An increased greenhouse effect results in global warming, which is predicted to result in melting of polar ice caps, rising sea levels, climate change, and changes in the global ecosystem. Human activities pollute the air with acidic gases such as sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides, contributing to acid rain. Acid rain damages forests and kills fish in rivers and lakes. Lichens are indicator species for air pollution by sulfur dioxide. IGCSE and O-Level Smart Biology M. Rashid Chatter 030046100457. Pollution of rivers by untreated sewage causes an increase in aerobic microorganisms and depletion in oxygen levels, thus affecting other organisms. Untreated sewage contains pathogenic microorganisms and is high in inorganic ions, which can cause eutrophication and algal blooms. Levels of organic pollution in a river can be monitored using aquatic indicator species. Nitrate fertilizers cause eutrophication and algal blooms in rivers and lakes, leading to the death of aerobic organisms. Inorganic waste discharged into rivers and the sea includes toxic metals, which can undergo bioaccumulation and biomagnification in the bodies of organisms. Insecticides cause pollution problems due to their persistency in the environment, toxicity to non-target species, bioaccumulation, and biomagnification. Insects and pests become resistant to insecticides and pesticides. Conservation is the management of the Earth's resources, including species and habitats, so that they are not overexploited. Maintenance of biodiversity is an important aim of conservation, helping to prevent loss of habitats and extinction and maintain a large gene pool. Timber production can be sustainably managed by controlled reforestation, avoiding deforestation and destruction of ecosystems. Fisheries must be sustainably managed to avoid global collapses in fish stocks. Many materials such as metals, paper, and glass can be recycled, saving energy and producing fewer pollutants than making them from new. Keywords: ecology, ecosystem, species, population, community, habitat, biotic factors, abiotic factors, niche, pyramid, pyramid of numbers, pyramid of energy, producers, consumers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, parasites, saprophytes, decomposers, trophic levels, deforestation, urbanization, industrialization, eutrophication, conservation, biogeochemical cycles, pollution, CFCs, ozone layer, sewage, parasitism, biomass, food chain, food web, nitrogen. Fixation, nitrification, lightening, denitrification, artificial fertilizers, deamination, leguminous plants, putrefaction, combustion, biodiversity, fishery. Glossary Carbon cycle, the continuous circulation of carbon atoms between atmospheric carbon dioxide and the bodies of living organisms. Carnivore, flesh-eating animal, e.g. lion, tiger. Colonization, the movement of animals and plants into a newly formed habitat. Community, a group of interdependent organisms that share a particular environment. Consumers, organisms in a food chain which live by consuming, eating, other organisms. Decomposers, fungi and certain bacteria which break down, decompose, dead organisms into humus and minerals. Denitrifying bacteria, anaerobic bacteria in soil which break down nitrates into nitrogen and oxygen. Detritus, the decaying remains of dead animals and plants. Ecology. IGCSE and O-Level Smart Biology M. Rashid Chatha 030046104457. The study of interrelationships between living things and their non-living environment. Ecosystem, all the interactions between the members of a community and its environment. Erosion, removal of fertile topsoil from a region by rain and wind. The main causes are excessive use of inorganic fertilizer, overgrazing, and deforestation. Eutrophication, excessive growth of algae in river and lakes owing to accumulation in the water of minerals such as nitrates, which promote plant growth. Food chain, a sequence of organisms through which energy is transferred. The first organisms are producers, usually green plants, and succeeding links are consumers. Food web, a number of interconnected food chains. Growth curve, the curved shape produced when the rate of growth of an organism or population is plotted on a graph. Habitat, a region of an environment containing its own particular community of organisms, e.g. marsh, sand dune. Herbivore. An animal which eats only plants, e.g. horse, sheep. Host, a organism in or on which a parasite lives. Humus, part of the soil which consists of the decayed remains of plants and animals. Larva, an early stage in the life cycle of certain organisms which bears little or no resemblance to the adult. Loam, a soil containing sand, clay, and humus in ideal proportions for healthy plant growth. Niche, the way of life of an organism which gives it its place within a community, e.g. as a predator, scavenger, producer, etc. Nitrifying bacteria, bacteria in soil which convert the decaying remains of organisms into soil nitrates. Nitrogen cycle, the circulation of nitrogen from the atmosphere to soil bacteria, soil nitrates, plants, animals, and and back to the atmosphere again. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria, bacteria in soil and root nodules which convert nitrogen in the air into soil nitrates. Omnivore, an animal that eats both animals and plants, e.g. man. Producers, organisms such as green plants that produce food. Producers form the starting points of food chains. Recycling, the reuse of waste paper, metals, glass and other materials. This reduces pollution and conserves raw materials. Response, an activity in the body that results from a stimulus. Root nodules. Back to the atmosphere again. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria, bacteria in soil and root nodules which convert nitrogen in the air into soil nitrates. Omnivore, an animal that eats both animals and plants, e.g. man. Producers, organisms such as green plants that produce food. Producers form the starting points of food chains. Recycling, the reuse of waste paper, metals, glass and other materials. This reduces pollution and conserves raw materials. Response, an activity in the body that results from a stimulus. Root nodules. IGCSE and O-Level Smart Biology M. Rashid Chatter 030046104457. Swellings on the roots of certain leguminous plants, such as peas and clover, containing nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Saprotrophs, saprophytes, organisms which feed on organic matter, such as the dead remains of animals and plants, by releasing enzymes that digest the food externally, reducing it to a liquid which is absorbed into the saprotrophic body, e.g. certain bacteria and fungi. Succession, the process by which one set of organisms gives way to another within a habitat. Succession ceases when a climax community is achieved. Symbiosis, a close association between two different organisms in which both benefit. Trophic levels, the position that an organism occupies on a food chain. Vector, an animal which carries disease organisms. Water cycle, the circulation of water between the water vapor in the air and the water on and under the ground. Short MCQs with right answers. 1. Humans have kept sheep for many centuries because they supply us with wool. The flow chart shows how a farmer would breed his sheep to provide more wool. 2. Which process is described by this flow chart? Selective breeding. 3. The numbers in the diagram show the amount of energy transferred through part of an ecosystem. 4. How much energy is transferred from herbivores to carnivores? 15,000 kJ, 13,200 kJ. 5. The diagram shows a food web in a rainforest. IGCSE and O-Level Smart Biology M. Rashid Chatter 030046104457. 6. How many trophic levels are shown in this food web? For 7. The diagram shows the carbon cycle. 8. Which labeled processes represent respiration? 2 and 4. 9. Which feature is found in a hydrophytic plant? There is no waxy cuticle. 10. The diagram shows a food chain. Phytoplankton, zooplankton, herring, sea lion. 11. Which diagram shows a pyramid of energy for this food chain? 12. In the nitrogen cycle, what are processes 1 and 2? 13. The diagram shows energy flow from the sun, through a food chain and into the environment. What is the form of energy for each numbered arrow? IGCSE and O-Level Smart Biology M. Rashid Chatter 030046104457. 14. In a pyramid of numbers, what does the top of the pyramid represent? Carnivores. 15. A few yeast cells were placed in a container of nutrient solution. The graph shows how their population size changed over time. 16. Which row shows when the reproduction rate was greater than the death rate for the numbered phases on the graph? 17. Which term is used to describe an organism that makes its own organic nutrients? Producer. 18. What is the principal source of energy for most food chains? Sunlight. 19. A single tree is food for a large population of caterpillars. Several small birds eat the caterpillars. The small birds are eaten by a bird of prey. Which is the pyramid of biomass? 20. Where does the energy being transferred along a food chain originally come from? The sun. 21. Which diagram shows energy passing along a food chain? 22. The diagram shows a pyramid of biomass for all the organisms in an ecosystem. Which organisms are carnivores? P and Q. 23. 3 human activities are listed. Which activities can cause the change shown in the graph? 1. Burning fossil fuels. 2. Deforestation. 24. The diagram shows a pyramid of biomass. IGCSE and O-Level Smart Biology M. Rashid Chatter 030046100457. Which percentage of biomass is passed from the primary consumer to the secondary consumer? 20%. 25. The diagram shows part of the carbon cycle. Which row shows the correct labels for the numbered boxes? 26. The diagram shows 4 ecological pyramids. In a food chain, grass is eaten by cows. The cows have insects living on their skin. The insects are eaten by birds. Which is the pyramid of biomass and which is the pyramid of numbers in this food chain? 27. The diagram shows a simplified nitrogen cycle. IGCSE and O-Level Smart Biology M. Rashid Chatter 030046100457. Which process in the cycle happens at stage X? Nitrogen fixation. 28. Which process does not result in an overall loss of energy from the organism? Photosynthesis in a green plant. 29. Which feature helps a xerophyte survive in its environment? Sunken stomata. 30. Which way does energy flow directly in a food chain? Producer to herbivore. 31. Which process forms part of the carbon cycle? Combustion. 32. Which organisms do not get their energy by eating other organisms? Producer. 33. Which statement explains why the energy flow in a food chain is in one direction? Energy is not recycled. 34. In a particular habitat, hyenas eat antelopes and grass is eaten by antelopes. What is the source of energy for the grass? The sun. 35. During aerobic respiration, glucose is broken down. This process recycles carbon and water. 36. In an ecosystem, which are the only organisms to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere? Producers. 37. The diagram shows a food chain. Grass, wild beast, lion. What is the original source of energy used in this food chain? Sunlight. 38. What may happen to the sun's energy used in this food chain? Stored in fossil fuels. 39. In the carbon cycle, what is the simple substance absorbed by producers? Carbon dioxide. 40. Which process forms part of both the carbon and water cycles? Photosynthesis. 41. Rabbits eat grass and foxes eat rabbits. What would cause the highest increase in the number of rabbits? More grass and fewer foxes. 42. The diagram shows a food chain. Rice plant, caterpillar, songbird, hawk. How many decomposers are shown in this food chain? 0. 43. A food chain shows how organisms depend on each other for their sources of energy, but all energy comes ultimately from one source. What is the energy source? Leaves of plants. 44. In an ecosystem, what happens to most of the chemical energy in the decomposers? It becomes heat. 45. The three-toed sloth is a mammal that lives in the forest of Central America. Sloths are eaten by wildcats such as jaguars and also by snakes. The sloths mainly eat leaves. What is the original source of the energy supplied to the jaguars? Sun. 46. Which process does not release water? Photosynthesis. 47. In a pyramid of numbers, what does the top of the pyramid represent? Sun. 48. By which process does water enter the atmosphere? Transpiration. 49. In which form is nitrogen taken up by the roots of plants? as nitrate ions 50. What products of respiration in green plants? Water and carbon dioxide 51. The surface waters of the ocean contain a population of microscopic plants. Which factor would result in fewer of these plants? An increase in the population of microscopic animals 52. Which of the following is an example of a food chain? Grass, antelope, lion 53. Which process removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere? Photosynthesis 54. Which organisms remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere? Producers. IGCSE and O-Level Smart Biology M. Rashid Chatha 030046100457. 55. Which process is not part of the carbon cycle? Transpiration 56. Which process is not part of the water cycles? Fossilization 57. Which process is carried out by bacteria in the root nodules of leguminous plants? Nitrogen fixation 58. Which process results in the loss of nitrates from soils? Denitrification 59. During the exponential, log, phase of a sigmoid growth curve, which factor limits population growth? Rate of reproduction 60. What is shown by the widest block in pyramid of numbers for a grassland ecosystem? The producers in the pyramid 61. What is defined as all of the populations of different species in the ecosystem? Community 62. The action of which type of bacteria would cause soil to be lacking in nitrates? Denitrifying 63. Which method will not help to control the transmission of malaria? Ensuring that sewage does not contaminate water. 64. The diagram shows a food chain, producer consumer 1, consumer 2, consumer 3. A. Disease reduced the number of consumer 2. What effect would this be likely to have on the numbers of consumer 1 and consumer 3? Key, plus equals increase in numbers, equals decrease in numbers. Consumer 1 consumer 3. Plus 65. Herbivores taking carbon atoms from plants. How do carbon atoms leave the herbivores? In feces, in respiration through death and decay. 66. In which process is light energy converted to chemical energy? Photosynthesis, plant respiration. X67. The diagram shows a food chain, mahogany tree, caterpillar, small bird, owl. In this food chain, which population has the largest biomass and which has the largest population size? Largest biomass, largest population size. Mahogany tree, caterpillar 68. In which natural cycles do photosynthesis and respiration both play a part? Carbon cycle, water cycle. 69. What can be continuously recycled in ecosystems? Carbon, energy, water. X70. The table shows the birth rates and death rates in 4 countries. Which country will double its population most quickly? Birth rate, %. Population, death rate, % population 4.52.571. Which processes result in organisms gaining carbon compounds, and in the addition of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere? Organisms gaining carbon compounds, addition of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, photosynthesis, and feeding respiration by plants 72. Which organisms can be sources of energy for decomposers? IGCSE and O-Level Smart Biology M. Rashid Chatha 030046100457. Producers, herbivores, carnivores. 73. The diagram shows a food chain, producer consumer 1, consumer 2, consumer 3. A disease reduced the number of consumer 3. What would be the likely effect of this on the numbers of consumer 1 and consumer 2? Consumer 1, consumer 2, decrease, increase 74. The diagram shows a food chain, grass, locusts, snakes, eagles. In the food chain below, the population of snake is halved owing to a viral disease. What effect does this have on the other members of the food chain? Grass, locusts, eagles. Decrease, increase, decrease 75. Which factors affect the rate of growth of a plant population? Disease grazing by herbivores. Light intensity. 76. What are possible positions in a food chain of a carnivore and a herbivore? Carnivore, herbivore, secondary consumer, primary consumer. 77. The biomass at each trophic level in an ecosystem is measured. The results are shown in the table. Which trophic level contains herbivores? Trophic level mass, GDM, 3. C1.278. Which method of malarial control is effective against both adult and larval forms of the mosquito? Spraying oil on standing water. 79. Which control measure would not help to prevent the spread of malaria? Boiling drinking water. 80. What makes the female mosquito an effective vector for malaria? It has wings. 81. 3 statements about malarial parasites are listed. Which of the methods can be used to control malaria? Insecticides are used to kill the vectors, netting is used to keep the vectors away from people, and people take drugs that stop the malarial pathogen developing. 82. Which method of control would not be effective against the spread of the material parasite? Safe disposal of sewage solids. 83. What is the original source of energy that flows through a food chain? Sunlight. 84. Draining stagnant water is one method of controlling the malarial mosquito. Which stages in the mosquito life cycle does this method destroy? Egg, larva, pupa. 85. Which process does not result in the return of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere? Photosynthesis by green plants. 86. In a food chain, which trophic level has the most energy passing through it? Producers. 87. A decrease in the number of producers in the food chain will cause the total biomass to decrease. 88. Which group of bacteria converts ammonia into nitrates in the nitrogen cycle? Nitrifying bacteria. 89. Cutting down large areas of tropical forest can lead to a reduction in rainfall. What is the reason for the reduction in rainfall? A reduction in transpiration. 90. Which group of waste materials are likely to be decomposed most quickly by the action of microorganisms? Moldy food. IGCSE and O-Level Smart Biology. M. Rashid Chatha 030046100457. 91. In recent years, important rivers in many parts of the world have become more acidic. What has caused this change? Air pollution by sulfur dioxide. 92. Which bacteria convert urea to ammonia? Decay bacteria. 93. On decomposition, which substance in decaying plants is the major source of carbon for carbon dioxide production by the microorganisms involved? Cellulose. 94. Why is a producer so called? It produces carbohydrates. 95. An ocean is polluted by an oil spill. Which is least likely to speed up the decomposition of oil by organisms? Presence of salt water. 96. By which process do producers obtain energy? Photosynthesis. 97. Nitrogen is cycled in ecosystems. In what form is most of the nitrogen in animals? Proteins. 98. To transmit malaria in the human population, how many times must a mosquito feed on human blood? Twice. 99. Cutting down tropical rainforest trees has many consequences. Which of these consequences would lead to global warming? Less carbon dioxide absorbed. 100. What is not a consequence of a global warming? Reduction in sea level. 101. What eventually happens to all the energy in an ecosystem? It is lost from the system as a heat. 102. Which words can all be applied to the organism that causes malaria? Microscopic, parasite, pathogen. 103. What is the main source of energy for green plants? Light. 104. Which organisms convert ammonium compounds to nitrates? Nitrifying bacteria. 105. The diagram shows a food chain. Mahogany tree, caterpillar, songbird, hawk. 106. Which organism is present in the largest numbers in this food chain? Consumers. 107. Which organism depends directly only light energy for its nutrition? Producer 108. How is malaria usually transmitted from human to human? By a mosquito 109. Which greenhouse gas is released from factory chimneys and by herbivores? Carbon dioxide 110. How is malaria normally transmitted from person to person? Infected mosquitoes. 111. The diagram shows a food chain. Mahogany tree caterpillar songbird. Hawk 112. What is not recycled from the hawk to the mahogany tree? Energy 113. Which of the following, when disposed of, affects a river ecosystem for the shortest time? Hot water 114. In which process is atmospheric nitrogen absorbed in root nodule and combined with other compounds? Nitrogen fixation 115. Why does the oxygen concentration in a river decreases when sewage is discharged into it? There is an increase in the number of bacteria. 116. Why does an ecosystem need to be exposed regularly to sunlight? Energy is lost as heat. 117. Which processes occur during the carbon cycle? Carbon compounds absorbed by living organisms, yes, and carbon compounds excreted by living organisms, yes. 118. Which organisms always obtain energy from dead organic matter? Decomposers 119. Which feature helps a xerophyte survive in its environment? Sunken stomata 120. The action of which type bacteria would cause soil to be lacking in nitrates? Denitrifying. 121. What is defined as all of the populations of different species in an ecosystem? Community. 122. What is shown by the widest block in a pyramid of numbers for a grassland ecosystem? The producers in the pyramid. 123. Nitrogen in the air cannot be used by plants until it is in the form of nitrates. Which two processes convert nitrogen from the air into nitrates? Nitrogen fixation by bacteria and lightning. 124. In which process is light energy converted to chemical energy? In photosynthesis, yes. In plant respiration, no. IGCSE and O-Level Smart Biology M. Rashid Chatha 030046104457. 125. The number of bacteria resistant to antibiotics is increasing. What has contributed to this situation? Not completing the course of prescribed antibiotics. 126. Which of these is a population? 1. All the in a rainforest. 2. All the tigers in a rainforest. 3. All the kapok trees in a rainforest. 2 and 3. Only 127. During the exponential, log, phase of a sigmoid growth curve, which factor limits population growth? Rate of reproduction. 128. Which process results in the loss of nitrates from soils? Denitrification. 129. Plants are adapted to survive in different environments. Which are features of xerophytes? Cuticle number of stomata thick few. 130. In which form is nitrogen taken up by the roots of plants? As nitrate ions. 131. What is a community? All of the populations of different species in an ecosystem. 132. Energy flows through a food chain. In which form does the energy first enter the food chain? Light. 133. Which organisms are responsible for removing nitrate ions from soil? Denitrifying bacteria and plants. 134. Decomposers play an important role in the carbon cycle. They release carbon dioxide. Which process is responsible for this? Respiration. 135. Which term describes a group of organisms of one species living in the same area, at the same time? Population. 136. Which trophic level has the greatest amount of energy? 1 mahogany tree with several thousand leaves. 137. What is a feature of some xerophytes? Leaves rolled up and covered with hairs. 138. What is a trophic level? An organism's position in food web. 139. How do green plants and mammals obtain their energy? Green plants from the sun and mammals from digested and absorbed food 140. What could be responsible for the conversion of nitrogen in the atmosphere to nitrates in the soil? Lightning 141. Which statement describes the effects of a disease which kills members of a population? It decreases the rate of growth of a population. 142. The diagram shows a food chain. Grass, mouse, owl. Which term describes the position of the owl in this food chain? The owl is secondary consumer having third trophic level in the food chain 143. The diagram shows a food chain in a rock pool. Seaweed, whelks, crabs, seagulls. What will happen if the number of secondary consumers increases? Fewer whelks 144. Which process in the nitrogen cycle is involved in the breakdown of amino acids in living organisms? Deamination 145. The diagram shows the flow of energy. Which form of energy is transferred at points 1 and 3 in the diagram? 1. Light. 2. Chemical 146. The development of antibiotic resistance in bacteria is an example of which process? Evolution by natural selection 147. Which term is used to describe the phase of fastest growth in a population of bacteria? Exponential 148. Bacteria are active in the nitrogen cycle? The conversion of ammonia to nitrates 149. Which type of energy is passed from organism to organism in a food chain? Chemical energy. IGCSE and O-Level Smart Biology M. Rashid Chatter 030046104557. 150. A herd of red deer live in a forest that contains snakes and a large variety of birds. Which group of organisms is an example of a population? All the red deer in the forest. 151. What is the name of an organism that obtains its energy from dead organic material? Decomposer.